Hello my lovelies, I'm going to have a look today at question 2 from paper 1 for AQA's GCSE English Language, and we're just looking today at the question. Next time I'm going to look at how you go about the reading and how you can look at the extract and what ways you can improve your quote selection. Then we'll have a look at the mark scheme and what kind of comments you can make on some of that language, and then we'll look at on the fourth video about how you move yourself up through the different levels on the mark scheme. So today I'm just looking at the question. It's just some overall comments about the kind of question. But it always surprises me that students don't do better on this question, because this is English bread and butter. This is the language question that's been on the paper since, I don't know, the year dot, since before I was even born, and it really surprises me that students don't do better on it. And I think there are two reasons behind that. One is the feature spotting approach, which doesn't get anyone anywhere, and the other, I think, is over answering on this question, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. So I think that there's some things about the question I'll just talk you through that will help you understand what's going on as well, about how you can also improve your answer. So it says, look in detail at this extract from blah blah lines. The extract's always printed for you, which is really cool. In the past, where we've had these kind of questions where it specified lines, if you didn't write about those lines, it was like you'd started writing in Spanish, and we could look at it and go, that's marvellous Spanish, but I can't mark it, it's not in the mark scheme. So if it was from line 5 or line 16, it was like Spanish. It was like suddenly you just started writing something that we just couldn't mark. And so lots of people tripped up on that in the past. And you'd have people who'd write their entire answer about bits that weren't in the passage. And so it's really great that the extract is printed in the booklet for you. And then the next 2 or 3 will focus on one that's from Laurie Lee, which is an autobiography, which you wouldn't get because autobiography would be naturally on paper 2 because it's not fiction, allegedly. Okay, so that tells you, and you can already see that you're going to avoid falling into that because it's printed in the booklet for you after the question. Now, the next bit of the question is always the same, so you know the question before you even go into the exam. It's always going to be, how does the writer use language here to blah blah? And since it's going to be fiction, you can largely know that that's going to be to describe, to narrate. I don't know, it's been described so far. It could be other things, I guess. I don't know how fixed that word describe is as part of the question. But how does the writer use language here to blah blah? What it doesn't say is, what language features does the writer use here? Or what fancy things from the year 2 AD can you find that the writer has used? So it's not asking you to find silly features or bizarre terms from rhetorical devices from the Roman times. What it's asking you to do is make some interesting comments about the way that language has been used and what that means to you. So that's what it's asking you to do, is make a comment on how. And then it says a little bit about what they're using language for. So the passage we're going to look at is Laurie Lee describing a garden. And we'll look at that next week and you'll be able to see how that works. But it tells you a little bit more about what they're using language for. And that kind of focuses your answer a bit, I guess. Okay, you can already see I've underlined the word could, because one thing has really got me, and that's people who students who cross it out and write should. Now, I know you've been told that by somebody. I know that somebody has said it must be some kind of AQA exam board trick, and it isn't. It says could for a reason. If they wanted it to say should, they would have written the word should, and if they wanted it to say must, they would have written the word must. So don't please cross it out and write the word should or the word must, because this is some, it's guidance for the kind of things that you might write about. And if you wrote about some things that weren't in those 3 bullet points that were still language, then that would be fine too. So it says could for a reason. Please don't cross it out and write should, because that's going to have implications elsewhere. One of the implications is if you try to write about all of this, it has consequences on question 4 and 5. What I mean to say by that is this question is worth 8 marks. That's 10% of the paper. That means it should get 10% of the time. And the paper is 1 hour and 45 minutes long. So you're looking at between 10 to 12 minutes. Now, even at my very, very, very best and fastest, with all the preparation in the world, the maximum I could write in that time would be sort of 2 quality paragraphs. And I've been writing for a very long time and analysing language for a very long time. So if you're trying to write about all 3, what you're going to do, or even more than all 3, is write something that's incredibly thin. It's not going to have the detail or the quality of comment if you're going to try and write about lots of things in 10 minutes. The other consequence of that is that people then don't take 10 minutes on it, they take 15 or 20, which then cuts into their time on question 4 and question 5, and you find then people putting their hand up in the exam room going, please can I have some more paper, because you really want to do well on question 2 and 3, and you feel like you can write so much because the passage is always really, really rich and there's so much you can get out of it, that has consequences. So you end up writing loads because your teacher or a booklet or wherever has told you to cross out the word could and write should, which you've done because some fool on the internet has said so, and then that has consequences. So you end up writing 3 pages on question 2 and writing half a side on question 4 because you've run out of time, or question 5. So that has time implications about how much you can write. But the other thing is, you simply don't need to. You can get hold of the mark scheme. We'll look at the mark scheme as well for this question. And it doesn't say, must do 3 times, must do this 3 times, must write 4 times or whatever, or give 4 examples. It doesn't say that. And you can get into each level by writing 1 quality comment. So if you wanted 5 or 7 out of 8 by writing 1 quality comment that hit all of the criteria, then that's enough to get into that level. So there's no reason why 3s become this. You must write about all of these bullet points. So what the bullet points are actually there for is just in case you have like a bit of brain freeze. So you go into the exam and you read the question that says, how does the writer use language here to blah blah, and you go, I don't remember what it means by language. So it's just to give you a bit of an outline really, and unfortunately it's become a bit prescriptive, which is why I think people are suffering as a consequence, because then they're trying to do too much in this question, which is then not enough on question 4 and 5. So we'll look at kind of what level 4 answers look like for 7 marks and 8 marks and so on, but also what that looks like for level 1 for 1 mark and 2 marks. Now in the other videos I'm also going to talk about feature spotting, which is what I called in my blog an arse backwards approach. Feature spotting is the process by which you look at a passage of writing and you find some examples of what the language is. And it always reminds me of a kid in one of my classes called Luke, who I've taught maybe about 20 years ago now. And Luke could spot a simile at 50 paces. You'd hand him a passage and Luke would find all the similes in there, and would put his hand up and go, Miss, is this a simile? And you go, yes, Luke, it is. Can I get an A star? No, Luke, I'm really sorry. Finding features is, not going to get you very far in at all. But it's become kind of a bit of a drive to use the fanciest, flashiest language that you possibly can. And I suspect this has come from teachers who've looked at the mark scheme and seen that it says sophisticated use of subject terminology for level 4. So I'm going to talk about what sophisticated use of subject terminology is in other parts of this video series, but suffice to say that I've marked some really, really good answers that have just referred to nothing more than words and said the writer uses these words, blah blah, and picked out a really nice quote, and then gone on to say something stunning about it. So it's not going to hold you back if you're not referring to polysyndactic referencing, or what else have I seen this summer? Synesthesia is coming up loads of times. I just think there's absolutely no reason to know these arcane and sometimes inappropriate, or sometimes badly used, or sometimes completely wrong terms when people can't identify an adverb, you know, and same things like, I don't know, this word, which is an adjective, and then misidentifying it. So I would say it's much more sensible to know that this is going to always be a fiction thing. So what do we find in fiction writing? Figurative language. We're going to find some similes, some metaphors, some personification. We'll always find some nouns and some verbs because they make up the building blocks of English language. Some adjectives, some adverbs, and by and large, with those 7 terms, you could probably answer this question to a level 8, to a level 4, 8 out of 8 standard. And you don't need to know fancy, silly terms from Roman times in order to be able to do that. The other part of that is then people also then they have a false sense of confidence that they've done really well because they found some silly term, but they didn't make a very good comment on it. So it's all about the quality of the comment on this answer, which we'll look at in more detail in further series. So the main things to remember are, this is a language question. It's asking you about figurative language, the way that the writer has used metaphors, similes, personification, possibly some other things that you might find. Maybe sentences might come into that, but it doesn't matter if you don't answer on those things. And the other thing to remember is that you do not have to write about all of those bullet points. They are coulds, they're not shoulds or musts, and it will severely hinder you to try and write about more than you're capable of in 10 minutes, because it will have implications elsewhere. So next time I'm going to look at how you can read better, how you can read that extract, and the kind of things you'll be looking at in the extract. And in the third one, on question 2, you won't believe it, but I'll be able to talk for a full hour just about question 2 because I'm like that. So the third one we'll look at, okay, so what's the mark scheme asking you to do? And then what does that actually look like in practice? And then the fourth one, I'll give you some advice on how you move up from level 1 to level 2 to level 3 to level 4, and how answers will do that. And of course, you'll all go straight to that one because that's all that people want to know, but it's worthwhile, I hope, watching all the others, so they, particularly the next one, because it's my advice on how you can read better and how you can actually maximise your quote selection process. And that's something, I think it's a very useful skill that's going to go across both paper 1 and paper 2, but also go into literature as well. So hopefully that made question 2 much more clear, and you can understand then the things that are going to come next in the rest of that series. So we'll carry on with that next time. So enjoy and have a lovely day.